I'm Jessica, 36, and last year my daughter Lily needed emergency heart surgery. While that was terrifying enough, what came after was worse. My family, the people who should have been there holding my hand in the waiting room, not only skipped her surgery but had the audacity to demand $10,000 from me weeks later. And when I laughed in their faces, they actually tried to hack into my bank account. Family is supposed to mean unconditional love, but mine showed their true colors when we needed them most. Before I tell you how my own parents tried to rob me after abandoning my child, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had family try to use you for money, hit that subscribe button because this story might help you set boundaries too. Growing up, I never experienced the warm, loving family atmosphere you see in holiday movies. My parents, Eleanor and Richard, were financially successful but emotionally bankrupt. Our house in suburban Connecticut was immaculate, filled with expensive furniture that we weren't allowed to sit on and decorative items we couldn't touch. Appearances meant everything: the right schools, the right neighborhood, the right social connections. Love, on the other hand, was conditional at best. My mother, a corporate attorney, viewed emotions as inconvenient distractions. She'd look at childhood tears with the same expression she'd give to spilled juice on her pristine carpet annoyance at the mess that needed cleaning up. My father, an investment banker, measured everything in life by its monetary value or return on investment. He spoke more passionately about his stock portfolio than he ever did about his children. From early on, I was branded the family disappointment. I wasn't calculating enough, ambitious enough, or ruthless enough for their standards. When I announced my decision to become a teacher, rather than follow them into the corporate world, my father actually laughed, thinking I was joking. When he realized I was serious, he didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. My mother's response was even more cutting. "Well, I suppose someone has to teach the children of the help." My brother Andrew, 2 years my senior, took the prescribed path. He graduated from an Ivy League business school, joined a prestigious consulting firm, married the daughter of one of my father's golf buddies, and moved into a house just 15 minutes from our parents. He became the golden child paraded at family events while I was introduced as an afterthought, if at all. I met Michael during my second year of teaching 4th grade. He worked as a physical therapist at a children's hospital, and we connected at a mutual friend's birthday party. Unlike me, Michael came from a loving, boisterous family where feelings were openly expressed, achievements were celebrated, regardless of their prestige, and support was given without keeping score. The first time I had dinner with his parents, Robert and Susan, I almost didn't know how to act. They asked me questions about my passions, my dreams. They actually wanted to know me, not just my resume. Michael was everything my family wasn't: warm, emotionally available, and genuinely interested in people beyond what they could do for him. When I brought him home to meet my parents, their cold reception didn't faze him. "Now I understand why you're so strong," he whispered to me later that night. "You've been swimming upstream your whole life." We married in a small ceremony 2 years later. My parents attended but spent most of the reception networking with Michael's uncle, who happened to be a senior partner at a law firm. They gave us a substantial check as a wedding gift, which initially seemed generous until the comments started coming. "Remember this when we need a favor, or family investments should pay dividends." Even their gifts came with invisible strings attached. When I became pregnant with Lily 8 years ago, I harbored foolish hopes that a grandchild might soften my parents. Maybe they'd find with her what they couldn't with me: unconditional love. The pregnancy announcement was met with practical questions about our health insurance coverage and college savings plans. No excitement, no joy, just financial logistics. Lily was born on a snowy January morning, a tiny, perfect human with Michael's gentle eyes and, unfortunately, my stubborn streak. When my mother held her for the first time, I thought I glimpsed something, a flicker of real emotion, but it disappeared so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined it. They visited for exactly 2 hours, gave us an envelope containing information about a trust fund they'd established, which they would control until Lily was 25 and left to attend a charity gala. As Lily grew, I tried to maintain a relationship with my parents for her sake. I wanted her to have grandparents, even imperfect ones. We visited their house monthly for precisely timed brunches, where Lily was expected to be clean, quiet, and essentially invisible. They never attended her preschool concerts, missed her dance recitals, and sent their assistant to her 5th birthday party with an expensive gift, but no personal note. Meanwhile, Michael's parents drove 6 hours each way just to watch Lily in a 10-minute school play. They remembered her favorite colors, books, and foods. They built the kind of relationship with her that I had desperately wanted with my own parents. Throughout these early years, I kept hoping for change. Each time my parents canceled plans or showed minimal interest in Lily's life, I made excuses for them. They're busy. They show love differently. They don't know how to connect with children. Deep down, though, I knew the truth. They simply didn't care enough to try. But still, I persisted, thinking that someday they would see what they were missing. That someday never came. Instead, a crisis revealed exactly where we stood in their list of priorities. Lily had always been a vibrant, energetic child who never walked when she could run and never spoke when she could sing. So when she started getting winded climbing the stairs to our second-floor apartment last spring, I noticed immediately. At first, we thought it might be seasonal allergies or perhaps a lingering cold. But when she began taking naps after school, something she hadn't done since she was a toddler, my instincts told me something more serious was happening. I scheduled a pediatrician appointment for the following week, but we never made it there. 3 days before the appointment, I received a call from Lily's school that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Parker Lily collapsed during recess. Her teacher said, her voice steady but urgent. The ambulance is on its way. The 20-minute drive to the school was the longest of my life. I called Michael, who said he'd meet me at the hospital, and then running on autopilot, I called my parents. My mother's secretary answered and promised to pass along the message. I also called Andrew, leaving a voicemail explaining that Lily was being taken to the hospital and we didn't yet know what was wrong. When I arrived at the school, the ambulance was already pulling away with my little girl inside. I followed them to Children's Hospital, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. In the emergency room, doctors moved with practiced efficiency, hooking Lily up to machines that beeped and monitored things I didn't understand. She was conscious, but confused and frightened. I held her hand and promised everything would be okay, a promise I had no authority to make. Michael arrived still in his work clothes, his face pale with worry. He took over talking to the medical staff, his background giving him the vocabulary I lacked in that moment. Tests were ordered, specialists consulted, and we were moved to a private room where Lily finally fell into an exhausted sleep. Hours later, a cardiologist entered our room. Dr. Wells was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that I appreciated, even as I dreaded what she might say. Lily has a congenital heart defect, she explained. An atrial septal defect, essentially a hole between the upper chambers of her heart. It's fairly large, which explains her recent symptoms. The good news is that this is repairable with surgery. Surgery. My 7-year-old daughter needed heart surgery. The word echoed in my mind like a thunderclap. How dangerous is the procedure? Michael asked. His therapist training keeping him focused on practical details while I struggled to process. Dr. Wells explained the risks and benefits, the success rates, and the recovery process. She was thorough and compassionate, but I barely heard half of what she said. I excused myself to use the bathroom, where I finally broke down sobbing silently as I leaned against the cold tile wall. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes of fear and self-pity before washing my face and returning to Lily's room. She needed me to be strong. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. There were more tests to run, preparations to make, and a million details to manage. Michael's parents immediately offered to come stay with us, but they lived in Ohio, a 6-hour drive away. I called my parents again, this time reaching my father directly. Lily needs open-heart surgery, I said, the words still feeling unreal as I spoke them. There was a pause, followed by, "That sounds serious. Have you checked if it's covered by your insurance?" No questions about Lily's condition. No offer to come to the hospital. Just financial logistics. "Yes, it's covered," I replied, swallowing my disappointment. "But we could really use some family support right now. The surgery is scheduled for next Thursday." "Let me check our calendar," he said. I could hear him typing, presumably looking at his schedule. "That's going to be difficult. Your mother has the Anderson case going to trial, and I have meetings in Boston Tuesday through Friday." "This is Lily's heart surgery," I said, my voice rising. "Your granddaughter's heart. I understand that, Jessica, but these commitments were made months ago. We can't just cancel everything on short notice. We'll try to stop by the following weekend if you're still in the hospital." If we're still in the hospital, as if an extended stay would be due to a choice rather than complications, I ended the call before saying something I'd regret. Andrew's response wasn't much better. He called back an hour later, full of vague sympathies and if there's anything I can do, platitudes. But when I specifically asked him to be at the hospital during the surgery, he hedged. That's a really busy day for me, Jess. I've got clients flying in from Tokyo specifically to meet with me. I'll try to swing by in the evening if the meetings wrap up early. By contrast, my best friend Amber not only showed up at the hospital with food and a care package the day Lily was admitted, but she also rearranged her work schedule to be available for the surgery day. Michael's parents immediately started driving east, planning to arrive 2 days before the procedure. Colleagues from my school organized a meal train, and Michael's coworkers arranged to cover his shifts. The stark difference between my biological family's response and that of our chosen family wasn't lost on me. As I sat beside Lily's hospital bed watching her sleep and listening to the steady beep of monitors, I felt the first real stirrings of anger, replacing my usual hurt and disappointment. For years, I had made excuses for my parents' emotional distance, but in that sterile hospital room, their absence felt less like emotional unavailability and more like abandonment. Still, a stubborn part of me held out hope that they would change their minds, that the seriousness of the situation would finally penetrate their wall of indifference. I sent daily updates to both my parents and Andrew, including photos of Lily and notes from her doctors. The responses when they came at all were brief and impersonal. The night before surgery, I lay awake on the uncomfortable fold-out chair beside Lily's bed, my mind racing with both medical fears and the painful realization that the people who should have been our strongest support system had chosen meetings and trials over being there for us during the most frightening moment of our lives. The morning of Lily's surgery dawned with the sterile brightness peculiar to hospitals. Michael and I had barely slept, taking turns, dozing in the uncomfortable chair beside Lily's bed. By 5:30 a.m., the room was bustling with medical staff performing final checks and preparations. Lily was groggy but brave, her small hand clutching her stuffed rabbit with white knuckles. "The doctors are going to fix my heart today," she told a kind nurse who was checking her vitals. "Then I can run really fast again." I checked my phone compulsively, searching for messages from my parents or Andrew. At 6:15 a.m., my mother finally texted, "Something urgent has come up. Richard has been approached about an investment opportunity that requires our immediate attention in Chicago. We'll be flying out this morning. Keep us updated on Lily." An investment opportunity. More important than their granddaughter's heart surgery. I showed the message to Michael, who simply shook his head, his disappointment evident but unsurprising. 10 minutes later, a text from Andrew: "Major client crisis. Can't get away today. Good luck with everything. Let me know how it goes." I set my phone down beside Lily's bed, my hands shaking with a mixture of hurt and rage. How could they? How could anyone choose money and business over a child's life-altering surgery? "Are Grandma and Grandpa coming?" Lily asked, her voice small and hopeful. She'd been asking the same question for days. I had promised myself I wouldn't lie to her, but in that moment, the truth seemed too cruel. "They couldn't make it today, sweetheart. But Grandma Sue and Grandpa Rob will be here soon." Michael's parents had driven through the night and texted that they were just 30 minutes away. "Oh," Lily said, her face falling briefly before she put on a brave smile. "That's okay. They're probably busy with important grown-up stuff." Her easy acceptance broke my heart. At 7 years old, she had already internalized the idea that she wasn't a priority to my parents. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. "The most important grown-ups are already here," Michael said, sitting on the edge of her bed and booping her nose gently. "Mom and Dad aren't going anywhere." When the surgical team came to take Lily to the operating room, I walked alongside her gurney as far as they would allow. "I love you to the moon and back," I told her, our special saying since she was tiny. "And to the stars and home again," she finished, her voice muffled by the surgical cap covering her blonde curls. Then she disappeared through the double doors, and the longest wait of my life began. Michael and I made our way to the surgical waiting room where his parents met us minutes later. Susan immediately wrapped me in a hug that smelled of her familiar lavender perfume, while Robert clasped Michael's shoulder firmly. They had brought coffee, homemade sandwiches, and books to help pass the time, small comforts that meant everything. "Any word from your parents?" Susan asked gently as we settled into the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. I shook my head. "Investment opportunity in Chicago." She pressed her lips together but didn't criticize them directly. Instead, she simply said, "Well, we're here now." All four of us will get through this together." The surgery was supposed to take 4 to 6 hours. As the 6th hour approached with no updates, my anxiety spiraled. Michael paced the small waiting room while his father thumbed through outdated magazines without reading them. Susan kept her arm around my shoulders, a steady presence as my imagination conjured worst-case scenarios. Finally, Dr. Wells appeared in her surgical scrubs, her expression serious but not grim. "Lily's surgery is complete," she said. "We encountered some minor complications. The defect was larger than the scans indicated, but we were able to repair it successfully. She's being moved to the pediatric ICU for recovery and monitoring." Relief hit me like a physical wave, leaving me lightheaded and tearful. Michael asked several questions about the complications and recovery timeline, his voice steady even as tears streamed down his face. When we were finally allowed to see Lily in the PICU, the sight of her tiny body connected to so many tubes and wires nearly brought me to my knees. Her face was pale, her usual energetic presence diminished by anesthesia and trauma, but the monitors showed a strong, regular heartbeat. The surgeon had fixed the hole in her heart. Now we just needed to heal. I checked my phone again, still nothing from my parents beyond the morning text. No calls to check if she had survived the surgery. No messages asking how she was doing. I sent a brief update to our family group chat: "Lily's surgery complete. Complications addressed successfully. She's in PICU recovering." My brother responded an hour later with a thumbs-up emoji. My parents sent a text the following day, glad to hear the procedure went well. "The Chicago meetings are going excellently. We'll call when we return." During the 5 days Lily spent in the hospital recovering, Michael's parents never left. They took shifts with us, ensuring Lily always had someone familiar nearby when she woke disoriented from medication. They ran to our apartment for fresh clothes, handled the paperwork jungle of hospital bureaucracy, and made sure Michael and I ate and occasionally slept. My parents called once 3 days after the surgery. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes and focused primarily on when Lily would be discharged and whether our insurance was covering everything. They were still in Chicago, my mother explained, as the investment opportunity had expanded into a series of meetings. As Lily gradually improved her color, returning her personality emerging from the fog of pain medication, the contrast between my in-laws' devoted presence and my own family's absence crystallized something I had been avoiding. For years, my parents didn't love us, at least not in any way that mattered. Perhaps they weren't capable of it. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. When we needed them most, they chose money over family. By the time we brought Lily home, my hurt had hardened into resolve. I would no longer chase their approval or make excuses for their behavior. My daughter deserved better, and so did I. Bringing Lily home from the hospital was both a relief and the beginning of a new challenge. Our apartment, once a comfortable haven, now seemed full of potential dangers for a child recovering from major surgery. Stairs became mountains, ordinary childhood activities transformed into forbidden risks, and our calendar filled with follow-up appointments and physical therapy sessions. The doctors had warned us that recovery would be gradual, with good days and setbacks. What they hadn't mentioned was the emotional toll, Lily's frustration at her limitations, her nightmares about the hospital, and her heartbreaking questions about why things had to hurt before they could get better. I took an unpaid leave of absence from teaching to care for her. My principal and colleagues were incredibly supportive, organizing a meal train, and even pooling their personal days to donate sick leave to me, a kindness that brought me to tears when I learned about it. Michael continued working but rearranged his schedule to be home as much as possible, often taking extra weekend shifts to compensate for the reduced hours during the week. Despite insurance covering most of the major medical expenses, the financial strain was significant. The uncovered portion of the surgery medications, lost wages, and the 100 small expenses that accumulate during a health crisis added up quickly. We weren't in danger of financial ruin, but our carefully built savings were dwindling, and the cushion we had maintained for emergencies was all but gone. Through all of this, my family maintained what can only be described as polite disinterest. 2 weeks after the surgery, a large flower arrangement arrived from an expensive florist with a pre-printed card reading "Get well soon" and my parents' names. The impersonal gesture felt worse than nothing at all, like a corporate sympathy card sent to a distant acquaintance. My brother called once 3 weeks after the surgery to ask if the surgery thing went okay. When I described the complications and Lily's difficult recovery, he made vague, sympathetic noises before quickly changing the subject to his recent promotion. The call lasted less than 10 minutes. My parents returned from Chicago but didn't visit. When I suggested bringing Lily to their house once she was stronger, my mother hesitated. That might not be the best idea right away, Jessica. We just had the living room recarpeted, and your father is concerned about potential accidents with her medication. Perhaps in another month or so when she's more stable. The carpet. They were more concerned about their carpet than seeing their granddaughter after heart surgery. Something inside me, the last thread of hope that they might change, finally snapped. I don't think we'll be visiting at all then, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. Lily needs to be surrounded by people who actually care about her well-being more than their furnishings. There's no need to be dramatic, my mother replied. We're simply being practical about the timing. I ended the call without responding, too angry to trust myself to speak further. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sobbed in Michael's arms, grieving not just my family's absence during our crisis, but the decades of emotional neglect that I had normalized and excused. I kept thinking they would change, I told him. That someday, they would see what they were missing and finally be the parents I needed. But they're never going to change, are they? People rarely do, Michael said gently. Not fundamentally. And you deserve better than spending your life waiting for something that isn't coming. As Lily's physical recovery progressed, I began my own emotional recovery. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma, who helped me recognize the patterns of toxic relationships I had been caught in. I read books about emotional neglect and narcissistic family dynamics, finding myself on nearly every page. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge that the problem wasn't that I wasn't good enough to earn my family's love, the problem was that they were incapable of giving it freely. Meanwhile, our support network of friends and chosen family grew stronger. Amber brought dinner every Wednesday and stayed to play board games with Lily, giving Michael and me a chance to catch up on household tasks or simply breathe. My teaching colleagues organized a fundraiser to help with our medical expenses. Michael's parents called daily and visited monthly, their genuine love for Lily, a stark contrast to my own parents' indifference. Lily's questions about her maternal grandparents became more pointed as she recovered. Why don't Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa Richard visit me like Grandma Sue and Grandpa Rob do? She asked one evening as I helped her with her physical therapy exercises. I had decided to be honest with her in age-appropriate ways. Some people find it hard to show their feelings, I explained. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa Richard care about you, but they don't always know how to show it the way other grandparents do. That's sad, Lily said with the simple clarity of childhood. They're missing all the good stuff. She was right, of course. They were missing the good stuff, her recovery milestones, her return to school, her first tentative attempts at dancing again. They were missing her resilience, her humor in the face of pain, her profound empathy for other children she met at the hospital. By the time Lily was cleared to return to school, part-time almost 2 months after her surgery, I had made peace with the reality of my family situation. I stopped sending updates they didn't respond to, stopped making invitations they wouldn't accept, and focused instead on the people who had proven themselves to be our true family through actions rather than blood. What I didn't realize was that my family's absence during our crisis wasn't the end of the story, it was merely the setup for an even more outrageous betrayal. It was a Sunday afternoon in early May, almost 2 months after Lily's surgery. Spring had finally arrived in earnest, and Lily was outside in our small backyard, carefully watering the flower seeds we had planted to celebrate her return to school. Her movements were still slower than before, but her smile had returned to its full wattage, and the dark circles under her eyes had faded. The doorbell rang, startling me. We weren't expecting visitors, and most of our friends texted before dropping by, knowing that Lily still needed rest and routine. I opened the door to find my parents and brother standing on our porch, looking as if they were paying an ordinary social call rather than making their first appearance since Lily's life-threatening surgery. "Jessica, darling, my mother," said air kissing near my cheek. "We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop by to see how little Lily is doing." In the neighborhood, they lived 45 minutes away and had never just stopped by in all the years we'd lived in this apartment. Before I could respond, Michael appeared behind me. Always the diplomat, he invited them in with more warmth than I could have mustered. "Lily will be excited to see you. She's out back watching her flowers grow." My father entered our home with the slightly uncomfortable air of someone visiting a foreign country, his eyes taking in our modest furnishings and the medical supplies still scattered on the coffee table. Andrew followed, carrying an expensive-looking gift bag that he set down without comment. When Lily came inside and saw them, her reaction was politely subdued, a stark contrast to the exuberant welcome she always gave Michael's parents. She showed them her surgical scar with matter-of-fact pride. The doctor said, "I'm super brave," and answered their questions about school with the practiced politeness of a child who knows these adults are family but doesn't quite feel comfortable with them. My mother barely reacted to the livid scar bisecting my daughter's chest, the physical evidence of the crisis they had missed. Instead, she asked if Lily was keeping up with her studies despite her absence, as if academic achievement were the primary concern after heart surgery. I suggested Lily show Andrew her new art project in her room, giving her an escape from the awkward interaction and allowing me to speak more freely with my parents. Once the three of us were alone, I expected perhaps a belated apology for their absence, or at least some acknowledgement of the seriousness of what we had been through. Instead, my father launched into a detailed description of their trip to Chicago, the connections they had made, and the exclusive investment opportunity they had discovered. "It's really quite extraordinary," he said, warming to his topic. "A biotech startup with a revolutionary approach to cellular regeneration. Ground floor opportunity, limited investor slots. The potential returns are unprecedented." I exchanged a bewildered look with Michael. Was this really why they had come to brag about an investment? "That sounds interesting," Michael said cautiously. "But we're not really in a position to make investments right now. Lily's medical bills have been significant, even with insurance." My father waved this concern away, as if swatting a fly. "That's precisely why we're here. This opportunity won't be available for long, and we thought of you immediately. We've already secured our position, of course," my mother added. "And Andrew is in as well. It would be a shame for you to miss out on something that could secure Lily's future." There was something in their tone and eagerness that seemed out of place given their usual financial conservatism. A suspicion began to form in my mind, but it seemed too outlandish to be true. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "We need an additional investor to round out our family consortium," my father explained. "The minimum buy-in is $10,000. We thought, given the potential returns, you'd want to be included." The absurdity of the situation hit me like a physical blow. They had skipped their granddaughter's heart surgery for this opportunity, had barely communicated during her recovery, and were now sitting in our living room asking us for money. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You want us to give you $10,000 for an investment scheme when you know we've just faced major medical expenses? When you didn't even bother to show up for Lily's surgery? It's not a scheme, Jessica, it's an opportunity." My father corrected his tone, suggesting I was being deliberately obtuse. "And frankly, it's an act of generosity to include you given your financial situation. Family should look out for each other." "Family should look out for each other," I repeated, incredulity making my voice rise. Where was that family obligation when Lily was having her chest cut open, when we were terrified she might not survive the complications? "That's not fair," my mother interjected. "We had unavoidable prior commitments. Not everyone can drop everything for a medical procedure, especially one that was going to be handled by professionals regardless of our presence." A medical procedure? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It was open-heart surgery on your 7-year-old granddaughter." "You're getting emotional," my father said dismissively. "This is precisely why women struggle in business settings. Let's focus on the opportunity at hand. $10,000 is a relatively small investment for the potential returns we're discussing." Michael, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "Richard, Eleanor, I don't think you're understanding the situation. We don't have $10,000 to invest right now. Even if we did after what's happened, I'm not sure we'd be comfortable entering into a financial arrangement with you." My brother chose that moment to return without Lily, who had apparently become engrossed in a video on her tablet. He had clearly been listening from the hallway. "Come on," Jess Andrew said. "Don't be so stubborn. We're trying to do you a favor here. This is the kind of opportunity that could help you get out of this." He gestured vaguely around our modest apartment. "Situation." "What situation?" I asked. "You mean our happy, loving home, the one where we actually show up for each other when it matters?" "That's not what I meant," Andrew backpedaled. "I'm just saying with your teacher's salary and Michael's. Whatever he makes, you could use a financial boost. Especially after Lily's medical issues." "Her medical issues," I repeated slowly. "You mean her life-threatening heart condition that none of you could be bothered to show up?" The tension in the room was palpable. My mother sighed dramatically, as if I were being deliberately difficult. Jessica, this attitude isn't helpful. We're offering you an opportunity many people would be grateful for. If you're still upset about the timing of our Chicago trip, perhaps we should have communicated better, but dwelling on the past won't change anything. Something inside me broke, or perhaps it finally healed. A laugh escaped me, startling everyone in the room, including myself. It wasn't a happy laugh, but one born of absolute disbelief. You want $10,000 from us. After everything, the laughter continued, slightly hysterical, but somehow freeing. That's not just tone-deaf, it's delusional. I don't appreciate being laughed at in my face, my father said, his complexion darkening with anger. This isn't a joke, Jessica. This is business. No, what's a joke is that you think you can ignore us when we need you and then show up asking for money when it suits you. I stood up suddenly, wanting them out of our home. The answer is no. Absolutely not. We don't have the money, and even if we did, we wouldn't give it to you. You'll regret this, my father said, rising to his feet. This opportunity won't come around again, and frankly, neither might we. Family loyalty works both ways. Does it? I asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, it hasn't worked in either direction for a very long time. My mother gathered her designer handbag, her face a mask of disapproval. I think we should go. Clearly, Jessica isn't in a rational state of mind right now. Clearly, I agreed. Having boundaries and self-respect must seem very irrational to you. They left in a flurry of thinly veiled threats about consequences and family obligations, Andrew trailing behind them like the follower he'd always been. The gift bag remained on our coffee table, forgotten in their anger. Inside, we later found an expensive electronic toy that was completely inappropriate for Lily's age, and interest still with the gift receipt enclosed, probably purchased that morning on the way to our house. When the door closed behind them, Michael wrapped his arms around me. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, I realized, surprised by the lightness I felt. I think I'm finally free. What I didn't realize was that my family's entitlement ran even deeper than I had imagined, and that their next move would cross the line from emotional manipulation to something far more sinister. 3 days after my family's audacious visit, I was grading papers at the kitchen table while Lily napped in her room, a habit she still hadn't outgrown since her surgery, when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was another telemarketer, but answered at the last moment. Hello, am I speaking with Jessica Parker? A professional female voice inquired. Yes, this is she. Miss Parker, this is Diane Murray from First National Bank's Security Department. I'm calling to verify some recent activity on your account. Do you have a moment to speak privately? My heart skipped a beat. Bank security calls rarely bring good news. Yes, I'm alone right now. What's this regarding? We had someone attempt to access your account today who failed our security protocols. They had some of your personal information but couldn't answer all the verification questions correctly. As a precaution, we've placed a temporary hold on your account and wanted to confirm that you weren't the one attempting access. No, I haven't contacted the bank today at all, I said, alarm growing. Was this online or in person? This was an in-branch attempt, Diane explained. A woman claiming to be you tried to make a significant withdrawal from your main savings account. When asked for ID, she claimed to have forgotten her wallet but knew your social security number, address, and mother's maiden name. The teller, following protocol, asked additional security questions which she couldn't answer correctly. A sick feeling washed over me. What branch was this at? The Westfield location on Main Street. Just 5 minutes from my parents' house. Can you tell me what the woman looked like? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I don't have that information in my notes, but I can tell you that when refused, she became quite insistent and asked to speak to a manager, claiming a family emergency. The branch manager became suspicious and denied the transaction, at which point she left abruptly. How much was she trying to withdraw? I asked, dreading the answer. There was a brief pause. She attempted to withdraw $10,000 from your savings account, the exact amount my parents had asked for. This wasn't a coincidence, this was my mother attempting to steal from us after we'd refused their investment opportunity. I believe this may have been my mother, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage and disbelief coursing through me. Eleanor Winters. We've had a disagreement recently about money. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Miss Parker, are you saying this might have been a family member attempting unauthorized access to your account? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I want to press charges. After speaking with the bank's fraud department and being transferred to their legal team, I learned that pressing charges would be complicated without clear evidence. The bank had security footage they could provide to the police, but prosecuting a family member for attempted fraud often became messy, especially when they could claim it was all a misunderstanding. What the bank could do immediately was change all my account numbers, add additional security measures to prevent social engineering attacks, and place alerts on my credit report. I authorized all of these measures, shaking with a mixture of fury and violation as I did so. When I hung up, I called Michael at work and asked him to come home as soon as possible. Then I sat at our kitchen table staring at the phone, trying to process the fact that my own mother had tried to impersonate me to steal our money. By the time Michael arrived home, my shock had hardened into cold resolve. I showed him the notes I had taken during the call with the bank. $10,000, he said, his normally gentle face tight with anger. They really thought they could just take it after you said no. I'm going to call them, I said. Right now. And I want you to listen. I put the phone on speaker and dialed my parents' number. My mother answered on the third ring. Jessica, I'm rather busy at the moment. Not too busy to visit my bank this morning, I interrupted. There was a moment of silence. I don't know what you're talking about. Stop lying, I said, my voice shaking. The bank called me. They have you on security footage trying to withdraw $10,000 from my account. They know it was you. Another pause longer this time. Well, if you're going to be technical about it, I was simply trying to expedite matters. After your irrational response the other day, I thought it would be easier to handle the investment paperwork myself rather than try to reason with you while you're in this emotional state. Her audacity was breathtaking. You tried to steal from us. You committed fraud, or at least attempted to. Don't be melodramatic, Jessica. It wasn't stealing, it was a loan we were planning to repay once the investment matured. We'd have paid you back double what we borrowed. I was doing you a favor I was nearly shouting now. You tried to steal $10,000 from your daughter who just spent every penny of savings on her child's medical care, your grandchild, who you couldn't be bothered to visit in the hospital. Lower your voice, she said coldly. This hysteria is precisely why I took matters into my own hands. You're clearly not thinking rationally about what's best for your financial future. What's best for my financial future is never speaking to you again, I said. I've changed all my accounts, I'm placing a freeze on my credit, and if you ever try something like this again, I will press charges. Family or not. You're overreacting, she said dismissively. And making threats you don't understand. Do you really want to tear this family apart over a simple misunderstanding? This isn't a misunderstanding. This is the last straw in a lifetime of neglect, manipulation, and emotional abuse. Don't contact us again. I hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Michael wrapped his arms around me as I finally broke down, sobbing against his chest. It's okay, he murmured. We're okay. She didn't get the money. We're safe. How could she do this? I asked between sobs. How could my own mother try to steal from us, from Lily? I don't know, he said honestly. I don't think we'll ever understand people who can justify that kind of behavior to themselves. Over the next few hours, my phone exploded with messages and calls. My father left voicemails alternating between threats of legal action for defamation and patronizing offers to discuss this rationally. My brother sent a series of increasingly hostile texts accusing me of destroying the family over a simple misunderstanding and questioning my mental stability. Following the advice of the bank's fraud specialist, we consulted with a lawyer the next day. She helped us draft formal cease and desist letters to my parents and brother, advised us on additional identity protection measures, and discussed the possibility of a restraining order if the harassment continued. Family estrangement is never easy, she said kindly after we had finished the legal discussion. But sometimes it's necessary for your own protection and well-being. I've seen too many cases where people keep giving toxic family members access to their lives out of obligation, only to be hurt again and again. That night after Lily was asleep, Michael and I sat on our small balcony with cups of tea, the spring air mild around us. I keep thinking I should feel more sad about cutting them off, I admitted. But mostly, I just feel relieved. Like I've finally put down a heavy weight I've been carrying my whole life. That makes perfect sense, he said. You've been hoping they would change for decades, making excuses for their behavior, trying to build a relationship that they weren't interested in maintaining. That's exhausting. What do we tell Lily? I asked, voicing the question that had been troubling me most. The truth in age-appropriate ways, Michael said. That sometimes adults make choices that hurt others, and that we need to take a break from seeing her grandparents because they haven't been making good choices. That it's not her fault, and that she is deeply loved by so many people. In the days that followed, I changed all our passwords, ordered new credit cards, installed a security camera at our front door, and blocked my family's numbers on our phones. It felt like preparing for an invasion, and in a way, it was my family had already proven they would violate our boundaries by any means necessary. The sense of being the villain in their narrative was surreal. In their version of events, I was the ungrateful daughter refusing to help with a family investment and overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. The gaslighting was so complete that for brief moments I would wonder if I was the unreasonable one until I remembered my mother at the bank trying to drain our savings without our knowledge or consent. A week after the bank incident, I received an email from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, demanding to know why I was spreading lies about my parents and tearing the family apart over money. It seemed my family had been busy creating their own narrative, casting themselves as victims of my irrational behavior. I didn't respond. There was no explanation I could give that would penetrate the reality they had constructed. Instead, I focused on rebuilding our sense of security and helping Lily navigate the confusing absence of grandparents who had never been particularly present to begin with. "Are Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa Richard mad at me?" she asked one evening, as I tucked her in. "No, sweetheart," I said, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "They're not mad at you at all. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that have nothing to do with children, but that make it hard for them to see each other for a while." "Is it because they didn't come to the hospital when I was sick?" she asked, her perception sharper than I had given her credit for. "That's part of it," I admitted, "but it's more complicated than that. The important thing for you to know is that none of this is your fault, and you are so loved by so many people: Daddy and me, Grandma Sue and Grandpa Rob, Aunt Amber, all your teachers and friends." She thought about this for a moment. "I like Grandma Sue and Grandpa Rob better anyway," she said finally. "They play games with me and listen when I talk. Grandma Eleanor always just tells me not to touch things." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. Even at 7, Lily had recognized what had taken me decades to accept, that love is shown through actions, not blood ties, and that some people are simply incapable of the kind of connection that makes a family truly worthy of the name. The week after cutting contact with my family passed in eerie silence. No more calls, no more texts, just an unsettling quiet that felt both peaceful and ominous, like the stillness before a storm. I knew my parents too well to believe they would simply accept my decision and respect our boundaries. They had never taken rejection well, and they had certainly never accepted me setting limits on their behavior. Sure enough, the storm arrived the following Sunday in the form of my Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, appearing unannounced at our door. I hadn't seen her in years, as she lived on the West Coast and had largely kept her distance from family gatherings. I was instantly on guard. "Jessica," she said, when I opened the door, her expression a careful neutral. "I know this is unexpected, but I'm here on behalf of your parents. They're very concerned about the situation and asked me to mediate." "There's nothing to mediate," I replied, not inviting her in. "They attempted to steal money from us after ignoring my daughter during a life-threatening medical crisis. The relationship is over." Patricia sighed. "I understand you're angry, and you have every right to be. But cutting off family completely is a serious step. They're getting older, Jessica. Do you really want to have regrets later?" It was the classic guilt trip delivered with just enough truth to sting. For a brief moment, I wavered, not because I doubted my decision, but because the lifetime of conditioning to prioritize my parents' feelings over my own was hard to overcome. Then I remembered my mother at the bank trying to withdraw our savings without our consent. I remembered my father's dismissal of Lily's surgery as just a medical procedure. I remembered a lifetime of conditional love and emotional manipulation. "The only thing I'll regret is not setting this boundary sooner," I said firmly. "I appreciate that you came all this way, but my decision is final." "They're saying you're having some kind of breakdown," Patricia pressed on, "that the stress of Lily's surgery has affected your judgment. They're worried about you, Jessica." "They're worried about their investment opportunity," I corrected her. and they're trying to control the narrative because they don't like being called out on their behavior. If they were really worried about me, they would have been at the hospital when their granddaughter was having heart surgery. Patricia's expression shifted subtly. They weren't at the hospital at all. Not once. They had meetings that couldn't be rescheduled. Something in her eyes changed, a flash of recognition, then a weary resignation that suggested this information wasn't entirely surprising to her. "I see," she said quietly. "That does put things in a different light." We spoke for a few more minutes on the porch, and I gradually realized that Patricia hadn't come as the loyal family enforcer I had assumed. She had her own complicated history with my parents, her own stories of disappointment and conditional support. She had agreed to speak with me more out of obligation than conviction. Before she left, she surprised me by pressing a business card into my hand. "This is my therapist in New York. She specializes in family, trauma, and narcissistic abuse. I started seeing her 3 years ago, and it's changed my life. Just keep it in case you need someone to talk to who understands this family." That unexpected moment of connection was the first indication that I wasn't alone in recognizing the toxicity of my family dynamics. In the weeks that followed, I would discover just how widespread the pattern was. The harassment escalated from subtle to blatant. Extended family members I barely knew began calling and messaging, some curious about the family drama, others openly accusing me of being ungrateful and cruel. My parents had apparently embarked on a full smear campaign telling anyone who would listen that I had become unstable after Lily's surgery and was unjustly accusing them of terrible things. Most painful was the discovery that they had created a social media post about being heartbroken grandparents denied access to their precious granddaughter during her recovery from surgery, complete with an old photo of Lily that made it appear recent. The post had been shared hundreds of times by sympathetic strangers, outraged on behalf of the supposedly wronged grandparents. My first instinct was to respond publicly to defend myself with the truth. I drafted a lengthy rebuttal detailing everything that had happened, my finger hovering over the post button when Michael gently suggested I talk to my therapist first. Dr. Martinez, whom I had been seeing weekly since Lily's surgery, offered perspective that stopped me from engaging in the social media war. "They want you to respond publicly," she pointed out. "They want to drag you into a public fight where you'll appear defensive and emotional, reinforcing their narrative that you're unstable. The best response to this kind of provocation is no response at all." "But people are believing their lies," I protested. "They're making me look like a monster." "To whom?" she asked, simply. "To strangers on the internet who don't know you, to distant relatives you rarely see. Does their opinion change who you are or the truth of what happened?" She was right, of course. The people who truly mattered in our lives, Michael's parents, my close friends, our neighbors who had helped during Lily's recovery, they knew the truth. They had witnessed my parents' absence and my struggle to maintain a relationship despite it. Their opinion was worth more than 1,000 strangers clicking like on a manipulative social media post. I deleted my draft and instead focused on strengthening the connections with our chosen family. We hosted a small halfway-to-recovery party for Lily when she reached the 6-month mark post-surgery, celebrating with the people who had actually shown up for us during the crisis. The contrast between these genuine relationships and the performative concern of my biological family couldn't have been clearer. The holiday season arrived our first without any contact with my parents or brother. I had worried that Lily would feel the absence keenly, but she seemed more excited than ever about our plans to spend Christmas with Michael's family in Ohio. Without the obligatory stressful visit to my parents' house, where Lily had always been expected to sit quietly and not touch anything, the holidays took on a new lightness. Then, 3 days before Christmas, a certified letter arrived. Inside was a formal document with my parents' lawyer's letterhead demanding repayment of family loans totaling over $15,000. The itemized list was as absurd as it was meticulous. Every gift they had ever given us was listed as a loan, from wedding contributions to Lily's birthday presents. Each item included the date, amount, and a note about the verbal agreement to repay when our financial situation improved. They had even included Lily's baby shower gifts, claiming they were investments in the child's future with expected returns. Michael found me at the kitchen table staring at the document in disbelief, laughing through tears of frustration. They kept receipts I managed between hiccuping laughs. For 8 years, they've been keeping receipts for birthday gifts and Christmas presents, planning to use them against us someday. This is actually good news, Michael said, reviewing the document. It shows how desperate and vindictive they've become. No reasonable person would consider a child's birthday gift a loan without explicit agreement. They're grasping at straws. Our lawyer confirmed this assessment when we forwarded her the letter. This would be laughed out of any courtroom, she assured us. Gifts are gifts unless explicitly documented as loans at the time they're given. They're hoping to intimidate you into contacting them, which would reopen the door to communication. I recommend we respond with a simple cease and desist letter and nothing more. The harassment continued to escalate, with my parents driving by our apartment repeatedly, leaving voicemails through blocked numbers, and even approaching Lily's school, though thankfully the administration was aware of the situation, didn't allow them access. After they attempted to confront me in the grocery store parking lot, following me to my car, while demanding I stop this childish behavior, we finally filed for a restraining order. The judge, after reviewing the evidence of harassment and the attempted bank fraud, granted a temporary order that would be revisited after 6 months. The restraining order marked a turning point, not in my parents' behavior, which simply shifted to more covert methods of harassment, but in my own healing journey. There was something powerful about having a legal document confirming that their behavior was unacceptable, that my boundaries were reasonable, that I wasn't overreacting or being dramatic as they had always claimed. Throughout all of this, Lily continued to recover and thrive. Her surgical scar faded from angry red to silvery pink. Her energy returned fully, and she was finally cleared to resume all normal activities, including dance classes, which she had desperately missed. Her cardiologist declared her heart function excellent at her 6-month checkup. Watching her return to her vibrant, energetic self, while simultaneously freeing myself from toxic family dynamics, felt symbolically appropriate, as if we were both healing from different but equally necessary surgeries. Hers had repaired a physical defect she had been born with. Mine had excised the emotional damage inflicted by years of conditional love and manipulation. As the months passed, I found unexpected allies. My Aunt Patricia became a regular presence in our lives, visiting from California every few months and developing a genuine relationship with Lily. She shared stories about my father's childhood that helped me understand the generational nature of the toxicity, how he had been raised by emotionally distant parents who valued achievement over affection just as he had raised me. I also connected with a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents, where I found validation and understanding from others who had experienced similar family dynamics. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in my experience or guilty about my decision to cut contact. These people understood the complex grief of mourning relationships that had never really existed in the way they should have, of giving up the hope that toxic parents would somehow transform into the loving family we deserved. By the time the 1-year anniversary of Lily's surgery approached, we had rebuilt our lives without my biological family. We had created new traditions, strengthened meaningful relationships, and established a home environment free from the constant anxiety of trying to please people who could never be satisfied. Michael had received a promotion at work, easing the financial strain of the previous year, and I had returned to teaching full-time, finding renewed joy in the classroom. The path hadn't been easy, and there were still difficult moments, birthdays that passed without acknowledgement from grandparents, innocent questions from Lily about family trees and relatives, the occasional flying monkey from extended family trying to pressure me into reconciliation before it's too late. But through it all, the overwhelming feeling was one of relief and gradually blooming strength. I had finally stopped trying to earn love that should have been freely given, stopped making excuses for inexcusable behavior, and stopped sacrificing my own well-being and that of my immediate family on the altar of a toxic relationship that took everything and gave nothing in return. You know what's funny? I said to Michael one evening as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset. A year ago, I was terrified of being without my family. Now I realize I've found my real family, you, Lily, your parents, our friends, the people who show up, who care without keeping score, who love without conditions. Family isn't about blood, Michael said, squeezing my hand. It's about who acts like family when it matters. He was right. And in cutting ties with those who had proven they couldn't be the family we needed, I had finally made room for the family we deserved. Today marks exactly 1 year since I officially cut ties with my parents and brother. It's also 15 months since Lily's heart surgery, a milestone that feels appropriate for reflection. This morning, I watched her chase our neighbor's puppy around the yard, her laughter carrying on the summer breeze, not a trace of the fragile child who once couldn't climb the stairs without getting winded. Her cardiologist recently declared her completely recovered with no activity restrictions whatsoever, a medical miracle made possible by skilled doctors and her own remarkable resilience. It's strange how quickly life reorganizes itself when you remove toxic elements. The void I feared would consume me after cutting contact with my family never materialized. Instead, the space they had occupied, space primarily filled with stress, disappointment, and emotional manipulation, was quickly filled with genuine connections and authentic relationships. Michael's parents visit monthly, now staying in our spare room and filling our home with the warmth of true grandparental love. Lily has blossomed under their attention, sharing inside jokes with her grandfather and learning to bake her favorite cookies with her grandmother. They never miss a school performance or dance recital, driving 6 hours each way just to see her shine for 10 minutes on stage. My Aunt Patricia, once a distant relative I saw only at obligatory family gatherings, has become a surrogate mother figure in many ways. Her own experience with my father's family gave her unique insight into my situation, and her support has been unwavering. Last month, she helped Lily plant a butterfly garden in our small backyard, showing infinite patience as tiny hands scattered seeds and spilled water, never once worrying about mess or perfection. The most unexpected development has been my support group, which began as a therapeutic outlet but evolved into something more profound. Seeing others at various stages of the same journey, some still entangled in toxic family dynamics, others decades into their freedom, gave me perspective and hope. 3 months ago, I started facilitating a new branch of the group, specifically for parents trying to protect their children from the narcissistic grandparents they had escaped. The healing that happens in that church basement every Wednesday night has become one of the most meaningful parts of my life. Financially, we've finally regained our footing. Michael's promotion came with a significant salary increase, and my return to full-time teaching along with some tutoring work over the summer has replenished our emergency fund. We're not wealthy by any stretch, but we're secure, and more importantly, our financial decisions are our own, free from manipulation or strings attached. Therapy continues to be a cornerstone of my healing journey. Dr. Martinez has helped me recognize and dismantle the false beliefs installed by my upbringing that love must be earned through achievement or compliance, that setting boundaries is selfish, that family obligation trumps personal well-being. In their place, I'm building healthier beliefs that love should be freely given, that healthy relationships include mutual respect for boundaries, that family is defined by actions rather than blood. Finding forgiveness has been complicated. Not the shallow obligatory forgiveness demanded by those who fear confrontation or uncomfortable truths, but the deeper forgiveness that comes with understanding and acceptance. I understand now that my parents are products of their own upbringing, perpetuating patterns they themselves experienced. I accept that they likely won't change, not because they can't, but because they don't see any reason to. They believe their worldview is correct, that family relationships are transactional, that emotional needs are weaknesses, that financial success is the primary measure of human worth. This understanding doesn't excuse their behavior or erase its impact. It doesn't create an obligation to re-establish contact or subject myself or Lily to further harm. But it does allow me to release the anger that once threatened to consume me, to stop wasting energy wishing for different parents or a different childhood. They are who they are. I am who I am in spite of, and perhaps partly because of the challenges of being their daughter. The most profound healing has come through my relationship with Lily. Parenting her has been a continuous opportunity to break generational patterns to give her what I never received. When she makes a mistake, I reassure her that her worth isn't tied to her performance. When she expresses big emotions, I validate them rather than dismissing them as weakness. When she sets a boundary, even with me, I respect it, teaching her that her voice matters and her needs are important. A few months ago, Lily came home from school troubled after a discussion about family trees in her class. "Mom," she asked, "why don't we talk to Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa Richard anymore?" Jasmine said, "Grandparents are supposed to love you no matter what." It was a difficult conversation, but I had promised myself I would always be honest with her in age-appropriate ways. "You know how we talk about safe and unsafe behaviors," I began. While sometimes adults can behave in ways that aren't safe or healthy for other people, including people they're supposed to love. When that happens, it's important even to take a step back from that relationship, even if they're family. Lily thought about this seriously. Like a timeout, she asked. A little like that, I agreed. Except that with grown-ups, they need to understand what they did wrong and try to change their behavior before the timeout ends. And sometimes they don't want to do that. That's sad for them, she said with the simple wisdom of childhood. They're missing out on knowing me, and I'm pretty awesome. You are absolutely awesome, I agreed, pulling her into a hug. And the people who choose to be in your life, like Grandma Sue and Grandpa Rob and Aunt Patricia, they know how lucky they are. Later that evening, she surprised me with a drawing of our family, Michael and me, her grandparents, Michael's parents, Aunt Patricia, her best friend Emma, and Emma's parents, our neighbors, her favorite teacher. This is my family, she declared proudly. The people who love me with their actions, not just their words. Out of the mouths of babes indeed. Lily had intuitively grasped what had taken me decades to learn, that family is defined by love, respect, and presence, not by DNA or obligation. That we can choose our family surrounding ourselves with people who genuinely care for us, rather than those who view us as extensions of themselves or means to an end. If there's one lesson I've learned from this journey, it's that establishing boundaries isn't selfish or cruel, it's an act of self-preservation and ultimately self-love. For those of you watching who might be in similar situations, wondering if you're overreacting to toxic family dynamics or feeling guilty about limiting contact with harmful relatives, please know this: you deserve relationships that build you up rather than tear you down. You deserve love without conditions, support without scorekeeping, and respect for your autonomy and boundaries. Breaking free from toxic family patterns isn't easy. There will be flying monkeys and smear campaigns, guilt trips and gaslighting, moments of doubt and waves of grief for the family you deserved but never had. But on the other side of that painful process is peace, freedom, the space to build a life filled with genuine connections and healthy love. Today, as I watch Lily run and laugh with the boundless energy of a fully healed heart, I'm grateful for the parallel healing that has happened in our lives. Her physical heart was repaired by skilled surgeons. My emotional heart was healed by removing myself from those who repeatedly damaged it and surrounding myself with those who cherish it. The family we've created, not the one we were born into, but the one we've chosen and nurtured, is stronger, healthier, and more loving than I ever could have imagined. And that ultimately is the greatest victory of all. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members for your own well-being or to protect your children? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you found this story helpful, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose their own health and happiness, even when faced with family pressure. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to step away from those who don't know how to love you properly. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you all the strength and courage to create the family bonds, blood, or chosen that nurture rather than deplete you.